we were just talking about James Gurley and Big Brother and the Holding Company and him switching to bass when the band kept going with Nick Gravenitis. Is that right?
More or less, yeah.
Yeah.
Nick and Kathy McDonald.
Okay.
We had Nick, Kathy McDonald. We had Mike Finnegan.
Oh, really?
We had an incredible band in the early 70s. We had some great players. We did stuff with the Tower of Power Horns. We did stuff with Richard Green playing violin. We had, a whole different vibe. We became like musicians. And we became, we took our creativity. We made a decision that we're not gonna go and do, try to get another singer and do the Janis material. Which, if we had, we probably would have been very successful. But we didn't want to do that. We wanted to sort of reinvent ourselves and get away from that whole thing and sort of prove a point that we were like creatively had something to say on our own. It wasn't just about Janis, it wasn't like these guys are nothing without Janis, which is what a lot of people said.
Now, was this about 71, 72?
Exactly. It was 70, 71, and 72.
Okay. And what was the group like with Nick? Because I got to admit, I don't think I've ever heard the records. I know you did at least one or two records.
Well, Nick did his material.
Yeah.
Nick didn't he didn't sing on certain things. Sam had songs, and Nick had songs, and there were certain songs we did with Kathy that she sang. And
was Sam in the band?
Sam was in the band.
Oh, okay.
Sam came back. Sam had left at the end of '68 to be with Janis. Janis had asked him to be in her new band, which was the Cosmic Blues Band.
Right.
And that didn't work out. And she fired him after about, I don't know, it wasn't even a year.
Really?
She fired him, and he came back at the end of 1969, early 1970. And that's when we were able to get back together, when Sam was around. Peter and I had tried during a lot of 1969 to keep something together, to get Big Brother back together. And we rehearsed a lot with David Nelson.
Oh, yeah.
And we were going in a whole other direction. We were going in a sort of like maybe country rock. Albert came out and heard us, and he thought he liked what we were doing. And then when Sam got fired and came back, David Nelson just sort of went off and did his own thing, which was, I think, the New Riders. He formed the New Riders. And then we got back together as Big Brother and started to do original material, not what we were doing with Janis.
Now, were you still sort of on good terms with Albert Grossman, or not really?
Not much. No, I never really saw him much after the real early 70s when he came out. I'm trying to think. I saw him at when Janis died. He came to the wake, which was a party that we had at the Lion's Share, which was in San Anselmo.
Right.
And I think that was the last time I saw Albert. But when I was living in Woodstock, which was 74, he was living in Bearsville.
Right.
He had his studio there, and I think Todd Rundgren was there maybe, and maybe some of the band people were even still there. But I was completely in a different scene in Woodstock. There was another scene going on that was like that I was part of. And Bruce Langhorne was one of them. I don't know if you know who he was.
I know his name.
Bruce was incredible. Bruce played with Dylan and Richard and Mimi Farina.
Okay.
Bruce Langhorne, myself, and Al Shackman. Al Shackman was Nina Simone's musical director, and also had been Harry Belafonte's musical director.
Wow.
And Al was a great guitar player. In the 72 and in 69, also Peter Albin and I toured Europe with Country Joe.
Oh, that was 69?
Well, and 72.
Right. Okay, because that's the one Phil Marsh was on.
He was in the 72, yeah.
Right.
Phil Marsh was in the All-Stars.
Right.
But when Big Brother broke up, when Janis left Big Brother, we didn't know what we were going to do. Sam was going with Janis, so we couldn't really do Big Brother. James was completely out of it. He was strung out and just not functioning. And we didn't know what was going to happen. And then Country Joe and the Fish broke up.
Right.
And Joe and Barry stayed together, and they asked Peter and I to join them and tour Europe, and we did. And
Whoa,
then
what was that like?
the craziest thing that we did is we came back from Europe, and we were touring all over the East Coast. It was fabulous. We were making great money. We were headlining. We had bands like Led Zeppelin open for us. It was crazy. And Peter and I quit. And the reason we quit is because we thought we could start Big Brother again, and it was going to happen with David Nelson, with this thing that Peter had this idea that, with David Nelson we would have another Big Brother. And that didn't happen, and because of that, we missed playing Woodstock.
Oh my God!
To this day, I go, bah, what?
I thought Joe had the Fish for Woodstock.
Well, he had a different band. It was Cold Country Joe and the Fish. But Peter and I left.
All right.
And he still had Mark Kaplan, a keyboard player, and then he got Dewey Martin to play drums.
And he still had Barry?
He still had Barry, I believe. Yeah, I think Barry was still in it. But then in '72, Joe came around again and started hanging out with me and asked me to join his all-star band. And he wanted to have this band with a lot of women in it. His wife was a feminist, and so he decided he was going to have a band with a lot of women. So he got Peter and I to play bass and drums, and he got a gal named Anna Rizzo playing guitar, and a gal named Tucky Bailey played saxophone, and Dorothy Moskowitz, who is now Dorothy Filarski. Dorothy played keyboards, and there was a percussionist, conga player, and Joe. And Phil Marsh.
Well, and Phil.
Phil Marsh.
Yeah.
It was a big band. It was like 9 people, I believe,
Wow.
in it. And we toured Europe with that. And that was great, too. It was fabulous. We recorded at the Chateau.
Right,
Chateau
where
outside
Elton John.
of Paris.
Yeah, Elton John recorded. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Wow.
And then I quit that, too. I don't know why. I don't know.
So how long was the thing with in '69 with Joe? Was that like a couple months?
It was a couple of months. It was like, it started in February, and I think we quit at the end of April.
Mm-hmm.
We came back in, May, but it was nonstop touring that whole time.
Wow.
Europe and the East Coast. And a lot of interesting things happened. It's where Joe got busted or almost got busted in Boston for doing the fuck cheer.
Oh,
the cops were standing
right.
around, saying, "You're not going to say that word, are you?" And Joe kept saying, "What word?" I say, "No, you know the word. We know what we're saying."
And then
I don't know what you're talking about.
Didn't he go to trial on that?
Something
happened. And he told me he had some kind of great line that he presented to the judge, and the judge couldn't convict him.
Yeah, it was a scene.
Yeah.
It was a time when Joe was like really at the top of his game and very popular because the Vietnam War was still going on.
Yeah.
When we went to Sweden the first time with Country Joe and the Fish, Led Zeppelin was our opening
That's
act.
amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And a lot of people didn't want to hear Led Zeppelin. They would yell Country Joe, because there were a lot of draft people, draft evaders, people who were evading the draft, which people don't realize what that was like now. When you got out of college, you had to report for military. So a lot of people didn't want to do that. They, rightly so, and so a lot of people went to Sweden, which was very welcoming for those people about that, because
or Canada,
a few other places, but there were a lot in Sweden. He had a whole, Joe had a huge fan base in Sweden.
He seemed like he really aligned himself with against the war, but also on the side of veterans and just
Absolutely.
people.
He was a veteran.
Yeah,
Joe is a
exactly.
Veteran. He was in the
He's
Navy.
in the Navy, yeah.
And he could relate to it.
Right. So I guess the other thing is you guys met Joe early on because he ended up dating Janis.
That's true.
Yeah.
He was dating Janis. They had an affair. A really nice affair, I thought. She really liked him.
Right.
And he liked her, but, they both had...
He told me career-wise it
couldn't work out. But he wrote a song.
Right.
And one day she came into rehearsal and she said, "Joe wrote this song for me."
Right.
And we tried to play it. We played it a couple of times, 2 or 3 times. And it was obviously that the song wasn't written for Janis to sing. It was written to Joe to sing about Janis.
Right. That's funny. Yeah. Well, I saw the thing in the documentary, The Sounds of San Francisco, where you talked about when Janis died and how hard that hit you, and I'm sure everyone else in the band.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing when, that in your life, sometimes you don't know how important someone is and, and the effect they've had on your life until something like that happens, and then the emotion comes. Yeah.
I mean, really, you guys and the Grateful Dead and Quicksilver and I don't know who else, Charlatans maybe, I don't know.
Charlatans, the Airplane.
Yeah.
Quicksilver, the Dead.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like kind of, there were actually, there were like 20 other bands.
Right.
In 1966 and 67 that most people don't remember.
Right.
And some of them were good. There was a band called Mount Rushmore. Yeah, a bunch of bands, a lot of different bands.
There's another one my friend told me about, and I have their CD, and I can't remember their name right now. They had a really strange, it was like Harmonious Bosch or
Frumious Bandersnatch?
Yeah, that's who it was.
Sure, Frumious Bandersnatch.
Were they San Francisco?
They were around the Bay Area. I'm not sure where they were from, but they definitely were
part
in
of
the
that.
Posters and the Avalon and the Fillmore for some gigs.
Yeah, Blue Cheer.
Blue Cheer, of course.
Right.
Blue
The
Cheer,
loudest band.
The Loading Zone was a great band.
Linda Tillery.
Linda Tillery.
Yeah.
They were around. I mean, even Sly and Santana sort of emerged at sort of the end of '68.
Right.
Is when those bands started to sort of come out.
Mm-hmm.
I first heard Santana. I first actually heard Carlos jam at the Matrix. I'm not sure if it was Big Brother was playing at the Matrix or somebody, but I played with him. I was playing drums, and Carlos was a young guy who kind of was trying to emulate Mike Bloomfield, I thought, at the time.
And Peter Green, I think.
Yeah. And he sat in, and I thought, wow, this kid can play. And then the next thing, they had a band that was called the Santana Blues Band.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next thing was they were opening for us at the Carousel Ballroom. And then the next thing they were
huge. Well, it sounds like they were huge because of Woodstock.
Woodstock really broke them.
Put them over the
top.
Put them over the top.
And Sly too.
Well, I was surprised this thing about that Sly actually had something to do with producing Big Brother. I mean, Jefferson Airplane at one point.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah.
I know. I remember when he was on the radio, though.
Maybe it was the Great Society or something.
Oh, maybe the Great
Society. I think
Society.
that's who it was. He produced the Great Society.
Yeah.
And they said he played all the instruments.
He played all the instruments. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they weren't that great band musically.
Right.
But they were interesting, though. They were interesting bands.
Well, talk a little bit about when you first got to San Francisco. I mean, you said you got to San Francisco as an art student.
Yeah.
Were you kind of in with the counterculture thing at that point, or was it more when you met Peter?
No, the counterculture in San Francisco in 1960 when I came out, a lot of it was centered in North Beach.
Okay.
And the Art Institute was one of the places where a lot of parties and things like that at the Art Institute brought in the sort of the bohemia of the time. The hate really was a kind of a surprise to me, and that I think a surprise to a lot of people. That I knew that a lot of people lived in the Fillmore because rents were cheap, and I lived in the Fillmore in '62. I lived on Buchanan and McAllister in a storefront there. And I knew, there were a lot of artists sort of ensconced in different places in the Fillmore, but there was no place to go. There was no coffee shops or bars to hang out or anything. Even in the Haight, I didn't think there was any place there. All of the counterculture stuff was centered, it seemed, around North Beach. When Janis first came to Big Brother, and I would go and pick her up and take her to rehearsals. And I would, after the rehearsals, sometimes we'd want to go and have a drink. And we'd go to North Beach. We'd go hang out in North Beach. and that was still in our minds. I think the center, the counterculture, whatever you want to call it, was. But then it sort of really, all of a sudden, the hate. One of the things, that first thing that really drew me to the hate was there was this place called the Psychedelic Shop that opened on Haight Street. It was the Phelan brothers opened this place called a Psychedelic Shop, and you went there and there was like poems and books and things like that and announcements. It's like, wow, Psychedelic Shop. And then Mike Ferguson, who was in the Charlatans, opened a place on Divisadero called Magic Theater for Madmen Only. It was a shop, and you went in there and it's like, what is this? It was like just filled with stuff, like all kinds of little dolls and strange things and collections of weird objects and things. And it was like maybe nothing to buy. It was just some place you'd go into. And so that started to happen. Things started to move in that direction, away from North Beach into the Haight and the Fillmore. And, that changed.
Now, did you guys rehearse in a ballroom or something, or attic?
1090 Page Street. I'm not sure if Sam lived there, but Peter lived there with his brother.
Uh-huh.
Peter and his brother managed it, and the place was owned by Peter's uncle. It was a really huge Victorian mansion on the corner of Broderick and Page. It's not there anymore. And in the basement was a small ballroom with an actual stage, I guess, and beautiful parquet floors and things like that. And Chet Helms, who sort of started to hang out there, he was the one who organized these jam sessions in the ballroom. It was like 50 cents or something like that. And that's where Big Brother started. When I joined the band in March of '66, Peter had already moved out of there. Peter already had moved in with Cindy and married Cindy, and they had a just born baby daughter, and he was living in the Haight. He had moved into the Haight.
And then Chet Helms was the one that brought Janis out here, right?
Chet is the one who brought Janis out. Chet knew Janis from the Austin scene in the early 60s.
Yeah.
And I think they had actually hitchhiked. They didn't hitchhike out to San Francisco, but I think there's some story, I'm not sure the details on this, is that they hitchhiked together from New York to San Francisco, I believe it. But they were never lovers.
Yeah.
They were always just friends.
Now, wasn't there a guy named Powell St. John that was...
Powell was a guy who Janis was close with, and she'd been in a band with him in Austin,
right?
A jug band,
right,
called the Waller Creek Boys.
Yeah.
And when Powell came, after Janis came, well, after a lot of people started coming out, and you talk about the Chicago guys coming out in '66. That started in '66, but also a lot of people came out from Austin. That was a scene, and that became a band called Mother Earth.
Right, with Tracy Nelson.
With Tracy Nelson.
Yeah.
And Powell was at Powell St. John.
Right.
Played harmonica in that band.
Played chromatic, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Powell was a writer and singer-songwriter. They had a drummer named George Rains.
And George is from Austin.
George was from that scene, and George wound up playing with Boz.
With Boz,
Yeah, and there were other people, good people.
Well, and then now that I think...
Sam.
Well, now that I think about it, I mean, Boz came from Texas. Steve Miller came from Texas, so you had quite a few.
Steve Miller originally came from Texas. Steve Miller actually brought his band out from Madison.
Right, from Madison, Wisconsin. Right.
But the whole Mother Earth came out with a whole scene.
Right.
A lot of people came out with them from Austin.
And I think Tracy was from Madison.
Tracy Nelson?
Yeah.
Could have been, but she was real Texas to me. She was
she's from Madison.
No kidding.
Yeah, she was Musselwhite's girlfriend for a while.
Wow.
Yeah.
She's still singing, I believe.
Oh, yeah, she's still singing great.
Yeah.